true to its street racing concept, accidents and crashes are as regular in Street Outlaws as people assume. Whether they result from failure of the many security measures taken by the show's producers or are just a matter of bad luck, the truth is that many shows' drivers have barely made it out alive from some situations. Such is the case of J.J. DeBoss and his wife Tricia, who in 2022 were involved in one of the most shocking and destructive crashes seen in Street Outlaws history. So, are they all right today? What actually caused the accident, and how are they dealing with its consequences? Take a seat and stay with us to know it all. Ever since we saw them racing in Street Outlaws Memphis, J.J. DeBoss and Tricia have done well in becoming known to the audience as a power couple behind the wheels. However, sometimes skills and talent aren't enough for things to go well on the road. Certainly, luck wasn't on the side of J.J. and Tricia in January 2022 when they had a terrible crash as they raced against each other while filming America's List second season's premiere episode in Texas. As it happened, a failure apparently related to the oil line of JJ's Hummingbird coming loose caused his Chevy Nova to engulf itself in flames. Just a second later, JJ lost control of his car, crashing against Tricia's zip tie and pushed it to the side of the road, where it also caught fire and severely impacted a staff vehicle parked nearby. Although both Tricia and her husband fortunately came out alive, the accident's terrifying video featured in America's List showed an evidently affected Tricia as she was helped out of the car by JJ and taken to the hospital right away. The product of his and Tricia's accident was that J.J. DeBoss only had to recover from a couple of minor burns on his face and arms to be back in the game and continue in the America's List season, unlike his wife Tricia, who got the worst of it. Tricia underwent an emergency surgery, during which 2 screws were inserted in all sides of her hips, along with some other procedures to repair the damage caused by her seatbelt. Apparently, she also suffered from back injuries, though what exactly is unknown, given that later in the show JJ only described it as a vertebrae or something in her back. As seen in an episode of America's List, Tricia was released from the hospital a couple of weeks later and was warmly welcomed by her family in Memphis. However, she was in a wheelchair for the following months, also sporting a couple of pulled muscles and various minor burns. Needless to say, she lost the rest of the season, and it's still unknown whether she'll return to racing at all. While her accident in America's List was Tricia's most terrible one so far, it wasn't the first time for J.J. DeBoss to suffer such a serious crash. Back in 2017, tiredness made him fall asleep while driving his Sierra pickup on an Arkansas highway at night at 55 miles per hour. Unsurprisingly, the incident ended up in disaster when the car struck a piece of concrete and overturned the 1949 Chevrolet Old Heavy pickup and 1966 Chevy Nova called Heifer he was hauling at the time, both owned by him. Although JJ suffered a couple of broken bones, his injuries only kept him at the hospital for less than a week before being released and ready to fix Heifer, which cost him a small fortune to rebuild. "I bought the car when I was 20-something years old, and it has a lot of sentimental value. I wanted to fix it at any cost," he told Dragzine. However, believing Heifer had only suffered some cosmetic damage, he took it to the streets of Memphis less than a week later, only for it to break, the wheel studs, and roll over twice, requiring more effort by the garage for an already tired and bruised J.J. DeBoss. Nonetheless, the important part is that he overcame both situations without losing his life. Everyone knows the names J.J. DeBoss and Tricia when they're on the road, but very few people know who they are when cameras are off. Born in Memphis in 1973, Jonathan Day spent his entire life roofing to continue his family's tradition, developing a deep love for old cars, which not only led the way to him becoming an expert in the mechanics aspects, but in building as well. Despite the fact that his family was deeply religious, his father's street racing career inspired the young Jonathan to follow the same path in life. Although JJ was imprisoned for 8 years for reasons still unknown, he rebuilt his life by learning how to appreciate and also respect life and everyone in it, and following his passion for fixing old cars. JJ now fairly splits his time between his passion for cars and speed and his young family with Tricia, with whom he has welcomed 3 kids, added to their 8 children he has from previous relationships. Regardless of his tumultuous life, JJ is nowadays known not only as the top race driver in Memphis, but also leading one of the entire country's most successful race teams, formed by Trisha, Precious Cooper, and her sister Chelsea. If it isn't obvious enough, JJ and Trisha aren't the only ones to have suffered horrible crashes while on the show, as Big Chief and Chucky are also remembered for almost not making it out alive from the road. Said accident occurred while filming Street Outlaws in November 2015, while Big Chief drove his Pontiac GTO and Chucky his 1969 Camaro. The race had just started when Chucky lost control and crashed against Big Chief, sending him rolling over the pavement in one of the most devastating and shocking scenes ever shown in the show. While both Chucky and Big Chief fortunately got out alive, their wrecks remain one of the most terrible Street Outlaws has ever seen, and is a constant reminder of the real dangers of racing, which Big Chief is deeply aware of. You don't talk that much about it until things like this happen. That's when you really appreciate all the extra time and money that goes into making a car safe. He said, after being released from the hospital with several broken bones and after suffering a concussion. In early 2021, the star of Memphis's team Precious Cooper suffered an ugly-looking accident while racing against Stevie Kroom from South Carolina. Although both teams were quite skeptical about the road's conditions before the race, they went ahead without knowing what was ahead. Only a couple of seconds into the race, Precious lost control of zip tie, and though she skillfully avoided crashing against Kroom, her car ended up flipping on the side road at least 8 times. The accident didn't look good from afar, but she was thankfully safe and just a little upset when JJ finally opened the stuck driver's door. "I'm fine. I'm mad about the car," were her first words after the crash. Zip tie wasn't the only car damaged in the process, but fortunately the impact suffered by Kroom and his vehicle wasn't that severe. There were no hard feelings between the teams. The most important part was to see everyone safely making it out alive. While Brandon James is a new name in the street racing world, his accomplishments so far have secured him a spot in Street Outlaws for a long time. He debuted on TV by appearing in Mega Cash Days, which he impressively won despite facing veteran drivers from all over the U.S. Despite his rapid rise to fame, Brandon unfortunately suffered a serious accident while racing against Lizzie Musey for an America's List episode in Nebraska in early 2021. The race had barely started when Brandon lost control of the car, flipping it over the grass, and barely avoided crashing against his competitor. Musey was the first one to run to his help, but he was thankfully well, but visibly upset. In early 2022, Brandon had another accident while racing against Memphis's Dennis Bailey for Fastest in America, but this time the accident was significantly worse than the previous one. As seen on the footage, Bailey quickly lost control of his car and ended up crashing into Brandon, who was sent over the side road before his car was engulfed in fire, becoming one of the most serious-looking accidents ever seen in Street Outlaws, on top of causing huge controversy regarding whose fault it was. Brandon fortunately made it out alive, but just barely. Known for his impressive feats while racing for the 405, James Love, also known as Doc, is definitely one of the most popular original Street Outlaws cast members. Regardless of his experience and skill behind the wheel, Doc crashed the Street Beast while filming the show in late 2020. As seen in the footage, his car rolled over several times on the grass before finally coming to a stop. Though his fellow drivers and emergency staff quickly ran to his help, the accident left Doc unconscious for almost half an hour. As Doc later affirmed on his Facebook page, he has no memories of the race at all, and was still struggling with symptoms from a bad concussion a couple of months after the crash. While Doc lamented how costly the repairs of the Street Beast were, he thanked his family, friends, and fans for their support, on top of giving a shout-out to the garage which built the chassis that he affirms saved his life. It would be an understatement to say the accident suffered by Jeff LUTZ in May 2021 was terrible. It all happened while he raced his yellow 1957 Chevy for Street Outlaws against the 405 team's newest addition, Damon Merchant. But what started as a normal race ended up with Jeff's car destroyed and himself thrown out. Fortunately, Jeff swiftly received appropriate medical care and was quickly taken to the hospital. The bad times came after his recovery, when he heartbreakingly realized rebuilding his beloved Chevy was an uphill road. Deciding there wasn't much point in recovering the Chevy, Jeff commissioned Dennis McPherson to build his next drag car. I've seen a bunch of the work Dennis has done over the years. It's beautiful stuff, and he was my next choice other than myself. He told Race Pages at the time. Although saying goodbye to the 1957 Chevrolet was an emotional roller coaster, given that it basically saved his life, his new-built Bel Air preserved that vintage vibe while providing Jeff with everything he needs to keep doing what he does best. The last couple of years haven't been the best for Shane McAlery and his Chevrolet Vega. Back in 2016, he crashed while filming Street Outlaws, leaving his Blackbird in the middle of the road and no other alternative than to retire from the rest of the season. Shane took over 2 years before being content with the Blackbird's rebuild, but unfortunately luck wasn't on his side during his comeback, and he crashed again in mid-2021. He was left pretty bruised and with a couple of broken ribs, but the worst part was seeing his car destroyed again after working so hard on it. According to a Facebook Live video he shared, Shane apparently isn't planning on rebuilding the Vega once again, and his future in the racing world is sadly left unknown. The 1981 Chevy El Camino is a very special car for the Oklahoma team in Street Outlaws. The legendary Elco once belonged to Tyler Flip Pretty, who died in 2013, and left the car in the hands of Big Chief, who gave it to Chris Kamikaze Day, eliciting the promise that he would do justice with it on the road. While Kamikaze did well in taking the Elco through a fair share of victories, Street Outlaws' audience saw it wrecked in a horrible way in 2021. Fortunately, Kamikaze got out of it unharmed, but had no other option than to sell the El Camino's unruined parts to afford his new C5 Corvette. Although Chris's decision to completely replace the Elco is understandable, given its deplorable condition after the crash, leaving such an important car behind is sad for any good Street Outlaws fan. However, these types of sacrifices and risks happen when drivers decide to pursue their biggest life passion, street car racing. Thank you for spending some time with us. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss another video. We also handpick these videos, which we recommend you watch next. You can talk to us on all social medias or ask a question in the comments below. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you back tomorrow.